This has been wonderful, and thank you all so much for being here because this has caused me to go down memory lane and to revisit these 4 months, and it was quite amazing. So thank you so much. And so let's go back to the beginning. So this started in 1993. I saw Much Ado About Nothing, Kenneth Branagh, Emma Thompson, Kate Beckinsale, frolicking in the Tuscan hillside. And I was like, I need to go there. But the next 10 years were post-secondary education, and then there were another 10 years of building a business, so it just didn't happen. And then this book came along, and I read it, and it was great, but then I also got the audiobook, and I found that it would be great to run in my ear when I couldn't sleep at night if I had a busy mind. And so a third of it takes place in Italy, predominantly Rome. So it was no surprise that in February 2019, when my husband suggested I take a sabbatical, I immediately knew where I wanted to go, Rome. So that's all I knew. And I just decided that's what I was going to do for 3 months the following year. And so I made a proclamation, which I was initially just keeping it to myself. I'm a very private person. I figured I'd tell, friends and patients as I got closer to my departure date. But I was convinced to put it out there, and I'm so grateful I did because it sparked so many conversations and great suggestions from people. And so this is what I posted on social media in July. I am going to experience 3 months of Italian culture based in Rome. I was definitely based in Rome. So then from February 2019 for a full year, this is what I did every morning over coffee. I was watching YouTube videos on travel, on solo female travel, on packing tips, on capsule wardrobes, on just to make it as easy as possible. I really got into it. And I must say, I enjoyed this so much. I was actually worried that, when I got back from Italy, a bit of a, like, what am I going to do then? I looked forward to it so much. I loved the planning part. And then March 2nd came along, and that was my departure date. And this was my view on the plane. So it was wonderful. I had the middle 4 rows to myself. So doing an evening flight, it was great. I could sleep. But, the writing was on the wall there that other people were getting nervous about traveling. March 3rd, I arrived, and I had just been wanting to be on cobblestones for years. And so this was so exciting for me. My first night out on cobblestones, took a photo to send home. So map of Rome, and right in the middle, you'll see some highlights you might be familiar with: Piazza Navona, Pantheon. And then I was really intrigued by this neighborhood just to the south on the other side of the river called Trastevere, because it was supposed to be a place where all the people lived, all the workers who built Rome. And now it's a places of the great food. It's where the food tours are, and it's where the artists are. So I was really interested in that whole area. And I was fortunate enough to find an Airbnb right there, right at that Red Star. It was fantastic, great location. So basically I spent my first few days just getting lost. Like, I don't know if you've been to Rome or any of those little European cities where streets are not like here. You just basically turn and turn and turn, and hopefully you find out where you are. That's what I did for a few days. And my first Friday night, I did a 4-hour food tour of Trastevere, of my neighborhood. And this was one of our stops. We were in a wine cellar and we're eating with a wonderful guide. And he was so funny, so informative. And then he just drops the bomb that we were in a cellar older than the Colosseum. And I was just like, this is just what I have to get used to over the next 3 months. It was amazing. He also took us to this lovely basilica in my neighborhood that I had heard so much about. And it's where my passion with floors started. I have so many photos. Don't worry, I'm not sharing them all, of tiled flooring. It's just beautiful, all the little detail. And apparently the colors indicate the wealth of whoever commissioned the churches, because the purple and the green, very expensive, had to come from another region and sometimes another country. So looking at the floors really gave an interesting indication of that. So March 7th, Colosseum, another indication that maybe people are more nervous about traveling, because of all the vlogs I had seen, all the messages were always, get a ticket for the Colosseum. The lineups are 2 to 3 hours long. That's the backsides of 2 women walking in directly. I wish I had gone in. I was like, no, I want to book a tour. that was the last day it was open. So then March 9th, nationwide lockdown was declared. Not quite full strict yet, but all the cultural sites were closed, cafes were closed, restaurants were closed. But there wasn't a limitation so much on moving around yet. St. Peter's Basilica was the only cultural site not closed. And so if you've been here, you know the scope of them, the size of this, that it is a huge circle. And basically there's a lineup coming from the door on the right, out around that big curve. And we're just looking at a lineup of people crossing it and going up the other side. There were so many people there because it was the only thing to do in Rome that day. But that night things changed. And they just made, really limited people's movement and really didn't want people going out. But the next day I did go for a walk and I found people in a park and it was wonderful. And so for the next couple of days I went to the park, I would go for walks, go for picnics, and then full lockdown happened March 14th. So March 11th, the World Health Organization declared it a pandemic. So that's when things really started to change. And full lockdown happened March 14th. So those are the dates of the park closed. So even the parks were closed. And it was really quite strict that we could only go out for groceries, pharmacy, or to go running. Like that was, or to walk your dog. So you had to have a dog or you had to have running shoes and moving very quickly. Otherwise, the police were going to stop you and ask for your identification. So this is a form that I had to have in my pocket with my passport every time I left the house. And so I think I understood what it meant. I had to handwrite it out. Basically, it was saying, my identification, where I live, and where I'm going. So I put the 2 grocery stores that I most frequently went to. So every time I went out, I would take that with me. And so March 15th was a big day. I had to decide, am I staying or am I going? Because that's when the repatriation call was made out by Justin Trudeau. And it was not a decision I came to easily. There were a lot of moving factors to consider. But really, when I was looking online, looking at my options, I'm seeing packed airports. I am seeing flights being canceled. And there were no direct flights anymore from Italy. So I would have to go through at least 3 international airports with all sorts of people, potential of flights being canceled in the meanwhile. And I thought, well, why would I risk that when I have an apartment booked for 3 months? So there were a lot of decisions that went into that, including, remember at the beginning, this was a plan from 1993. It's not like I travel a lot. It's not like this was just another destination for me. This was special. I didn't want to leave in case things opened up again in a few weeks. I would have missed a wonderful opportunity. I had spoken to the embassy and they said, if you have the means to stay, don't risk travel. And so I took them up on that. Just in case you were thinking of, who is she to think that she can stay there when nobody else does? I did a lot of homework and I had full support of my family. And for that, I'm very grateful. And so this is basically where I stayed for many, many weeks because we couldn't go out, but I was fortunate to have this little stoop right outside my door. So I spent a lot of time there reading. This was lovely. All of these signs started popping out outside of windows. So when I would go to the grocery store, when I go to the farmer's market, tutto andrà bene. Everything will be okay. They were done like this. Children did them with rainbows. They were just all over. It was lovely. It was like our theme for March and April. Things I had to learn: how to make coffee, because all the cafes were closed. And so a moka pot, Bialetti, wonderful. Produce. So for the first couple of weeks I was there, I'd go to the farmer's market and just grab what I wanted, but then the farmer's market's closed. And so I'd have to go to a grocery store where the produce is one room, may or may not be identified what it is. And the scale is in another room. And there you have to put your food on it and click the right button and it automatically spits out a sticker. And so there was a lot of backing and forthing and figuring things out, but that was my experience. That was fun. And then the gloves and the masks, basically just putting them in the sun every day because it was the least I could do because I had to keep reusing them. I only brought those for the flight. I ended up having to use those every day I went out. March. So when people say, how was it? How was your time over there? I describe March as tense, right? There were a lot of unknowns. you know, numbers are going up. There's a lot of fear. There was also, I can only stay in this 2-bedroom apartment and I'm not supposed to go out, right? So your mind can do things. I certainly felt grateful. I knew that there were people who had it much worse off. There were Olympians who had been training for years, maybe their life. There were weddings that had to be canceled. There were funerals that couldn't happen. There were families that couldn't be together. I knew that not being able to see Italy was not a big issue, right? So I knew it's okay, I am safe. That was fine, but it was still tense. There were a lot of unknowns. So here are the rules I made for myself. I have to get out of my PJs by 10 a.m. Didn't want to just stay in that state. Groceries, although they said shop for like 2 to 3 weeks at a time, or at least 1 week, I thought I need to be out with people. I am alone. For my mental health, for my physical health, I need to get out. So I would only go and buy 2 to 3 days worth at a time, come home. Okay, you have to stand in line for half an hour to even get into the grocery store, but really, what else was I going to do? So I was totally fine with that. I checked COVID stats only once a day. There was a wonderful medical doctor from London, Ontario, who did a really good YouTube video, an overview of the world and then Canada every day. That was great. And YouTube channels only that were positive. One is called the Chateau Diaries, and I watch it to this day. It is absolutely joyful. One Bike, One World. And admittedly, I watched a few Christmas movies. And so this is basically a staple: Pecorino Romano, dark chocolate, and tequila, because wine just didn't cut it. Okay, back on. April 1st, I received this email from Air Canada that they have canceled my flight. I spent a few hours wondering if this is a, April Fool's joke, but I didn't think they were, that sick. And so this was interesting because until this point, I always had a way home, right? So although I'm here, I have a way home, May 29th. But as of April 1st, kind of felt a little like an untethered balloon. No flight home. But this made up for it. April 2nd, we were told that we could walk 500 meters from our door. So of course I found a website that I could see a 500-meter radius from my door. I found it and I walked for an hour every day and it was fantastic. So I found stairs, I found walls, this wall I would follow. And it was great because it'd be like, this must be something. And so you go home and you get on Google Maps and, that would take up some time, which was wonderful to figure out where am I, what am I looking at? And this wall was built between 271 and 275 AD. And one of the original ancient walls of Rome. Just amazing. And it's still standing. And it's quite large. And there's several of them. So there's another part of the wall with these wonderful umbrella pines. I love them. They're as common as maple trees are here. Rome is really lush. There's just so much greenery. This is also part of my walk. Love this. Loved it for the car. I understand now why the cars there are so small. There's so many of them and all the streets are so narrow. They remind me of Mr. Bean. But the reason I took this is my 12-year-old nephew asked me one night on a chat, have you seen any old stones? And I was like, well, yes, there's a lot of old stones here. But it helped me because I'm doing a 1-hour walk, but within a very small area. It gave me something to do on my walk. And I kept looking for new old stones to share with them. Take a photo, share a story. So this is one of them. I like this. This is like how they deal with traffic, or at least an example of it. So on the right, it's like an arch, and it looks like it used to be a roundabout. But I guess they decided for whatever reason they didn't like that because this is only one way and maybe it's causing accidents. So instead of doing all sorts of construction, they just put a bunch of potted plants there, and that's how they change the traffic movement. I like that. I like the speed there. This was from a lookout that I would go past every day, looking out across the Tiber River to the center of ancient Rome. And what always crossed my mind was, am I going to be able to see it? Am I going to get in there, or is this as good as it gets before I'm able to get home? And so I dreamt. And I loved it, and just being able to look at it. And it was sad at the time, but it got better. But for perspective, on your far left, there's a very shallow dome, and that's the Pantheon. And then over more on the right, that big white building a lot of the people call it the wedding cake building. Very large. We'll come back to that one. The farmer's market reopened, which was wonderful. Of course, then I still had to ask for things, but you know, at least there was a lot of gesturing and pointing, and the fellow I went to didn't speak any English either, and I didn't speak any Italian, so that was interesting. This is an enormous staircase directly next to the apartment I had, the little Airbnb. And so this is basically where I spent April. I walked halfway up every day with my Kindle, and I just sat there and read. We weren't technically supposed to be outside if we weren't exercising, but I figured, well, partially I'm halfway up, who's going to go to the effort of walking up to me? But then also I could just stand up and say, hey, there's my door. I was never bothered about that. So that was wonderful. I got a great tan. And then I think this is one of the first days in May. Things are starting to change. There's people in this photo. This was really exciting. I hadn't seen this many people since lockdown. And so you could just tell the energy was changing. You could hear children's voices. Things were changing. And then the next day, I believe it was May 4th, they announced that they lifted that 500-meter limit. We could go wherever we wanted within the city. This is the only mirror selfie I've ever taken. It was multi-purpose. It was sending it home to be like, thanks, sweetie, your care package arrived. Shorts came just in time. And I am on my way out to explore the city. I look at my face in that and I just know exactly how I felt. And it was amazing. So I went out, and this is not what I saw. This is what I was prepared for. This is the Pantheon, all right? Because the year of preparing, it was Rome. Part of Rome is crowds. People love going to Rome. So part of enjoying it is going to be the people. So this is the Trevi Fountain. And I figured that if I wanted to get anywhere near the water, I'd have to wake up at the break of dawn. That's another photo of it. Spanish Steps, Colosseum. And interesting, my biggest concern about going to Italy, not is that I don't know anybody, not that I don't know the language. I was worried about pickpockets because there's not a lot of crime in Rome, but there's a lot of pickpockets. And as you can see with all the crowds, you know, they can do quite well. So this is what I was expecting. Joke's on me. Because I went out on May 4th, and that was the Pantheon. And that's Trevi Fountain. And that's what I found at Spanish Steps. Now, I'm taking the photo from the top because I noticed there were some police officers at the bottom. And I was thinking, ooh, maybe they're there to be controlling the movements of people, and that we're not supposed to be taking photos, we're supposed to be only exercising. I found out over the coming week that basically there are police and guards at every monument and a lot of churches and a lot of the fountains. So they weren't there to police me. They were just there doing their job and protecting the monuments. So went back a week later and felt a little more bold. Took a photo from the bottom, but still not many people there. Colosseum, just me. And St. Peter's Square. So remember I said how big it was and how there were people lined up and going across and around the sides. Now you can see more kind of that perspective. There were a lot of people lining up for the Basilica that day before lockdown. But this is what I really wanted to do. I just wanted to go around and enjoy the views, right? It was so beautiful. I have so many photos. Don't worry, I'm not sharing them all, but I have so many photos of just walking around and the architecture and the colors and the cobblestones. So I just loved, like on the left, there's the street, and that on the right, like that's an old ruin, and they didn't put a fence around it. They didn't make it inaccessible to people. They just built a building in the middle of it, right up to the walls. They work with the history that's there, and I loved it. And this is more of the ruins. 3 sides are all traffic, and basically it's a cat colony. Cats are in there and you can adopt them. It's wonderful. It's like a humane society with features. There's another Colosseum photo. You can see the extra walls that are missing on about half of the Colosseum. Lots of greenery. I loved how just green grew up buildings. And then there was also during jasmine season, oh my gosh, it smelled amazing. And then the other one is a little corner where you see the greenery and the lights at night. It was all so beautiful, day or night. This I took for a couple of reasons. One, the jasmine was amazing, but also this is how businesses close their doors at night. or when they're closed, and you don't know what's behind them because they don't have signs. This, though, you can see that there is the name is kind of carved into the metal at the top, but a lot of stores didn't even have that, because apparently if you put a signage on your store, and I think it's more if it's on the wall, you have to pay an extra fee to the city. So a lot of businesses don't even have signage. It's just, you have to know where they are or go by when they're open and you get to see what's in them. But for so long, they were just all closed. They were just metal doors and I didn't know what was in there. Just to keep things real. Also in the news, releasing some mafia from prisons. So just, remembering amongst all that beauty, there is also another element to Italy. Challenges of not knowing the native language. So during a pandemic, they are assuming there are no tourists, rightfully so. So they don't need to have signs in any other language but Italian. So that form that I had to fill out was only available in Italian. Signage anywhere, how things work, they were all in Italian. And so there was a lot of, I would see things and then I'd have to Google and I'd have to search on the English newspaper, and I would go to a great Facebook page called Expats in Rome. And from all those sources trying to figure out, okay, what am I allowed to do? What are the rules? What's happening? But, there were some challenges. A lot of benefits. A big benefit that I saw of not knowing the language is that I didn't hear people's angst and anxiety and concerns. And so I truly feel that I had a rose-colored glasses experience. And it wasn't just, I got to see nobody at the monuments. I understood at the time that that was amazing and that was unusual. It wasn't until I was back in Canada in July and August, hearing what the conversations were here about, anywhere you line up, if you see people, COVID is the conversation. When it came to like August, moms and dads talking about, are the kids going back to school? What will we do if they don't? How will it work out in this scenario, in that scenario? Thanksgiving came and it was, okay, the table of 14, how many are going to be around it? Who can come, who can't, who are we comfortable with? All of these things I realized were happening when I was in Rome. I just didn't know because I didn't hear them, right? I didn't know people when I was there. And even sitting at a cafe and there were conversations around me, I didn't know what they were saying. And I really actually saw that as a gift. And I recognize that. Piazza del Popolo. This is a popular piazza, often quite busy, big gathering space, big Egyptian obelisk in the middle. And this was exciting. This was maybe mid-May. And I think this was the most people I had seen since walking around when I went to the Colosseum before lockdown. So every time I saw people, it just was encouraging that life goes on. It was great. And then I returned a few weeks later for Black Lives Matter, and you can see good gathering place. I kept my distance from everybody and I wore my mask, but I was present. This was important. And so that was another perspective on that same square. This was interesting to realize. I had an aha moment one day standing at that Black Star, because all the little streets in this city, I would just roam. I would think, okay, well, I want to get to the Pantheon today, but I wouldn't make a plan as to how I'm going to get there. I would be like, okay, well, it's that direction. And so but no streets are straight, and it would take me a while to finally get there. And I would see amazing things along the way. I had no problem with that, really. What else was I going to do? And so it wasn't until after a couple of weeks that I found myself standing at that Black Star, and this is what I saw. So that red dot is Piazza del Popolo. The blue dot is the Spanish Steps, and the purple dot is that big white wedding cake building that I mentioned. So standing at that star, there's the Piazza del Popolo. You can see that obelisk, that tall structure. And then when I turned right, there's the Spanish Steps. And when I turn right again, there's that big wedding cake building. And no people or cars. But it just brought me into perspective how small this city is. It can take a long time to get from A to B if you're getting lost, but it's a relatively small city. You can get around very efficiently, bike or on your feet. And for perspective, again, there was me. That's where I had the Airbnb. So I just felt like I was in the middle of it. It was amazing. And then if you just look to the left of where my red star is, so where I was living, you're going to see a big green space. That was the largest landscaped park in Rome. It was like a 10-minute walk away from me. So every day I was out walking 5 to 6 hours a day, right? Because firstly, I'm in Rome, and what else am I going to do? So I was out walking, and one of those walks, I tended to go with the park, and it was a real park. Like, it was hard to believe you were still inside the city. It was absolutely beautiful, huge. May 28th, I finally find a flight home. This was exciting because until then I couldn't find flights. And so that finally happened. And I had another aha moment with this. So professionally, I'm a naturopathic doctor, and it's always trying to find the cause of health issues. And I often find stress is a big one. And I really help people through, times when they're coming for certain symptoms. I want to address how their body adapts to stress. And then I spent, the past year or two was reading things about, well, it's not if we have stress in our life, it's our perception of stress. So I was thinking, maybe I don't need to be addressing it as much as I have been. But I didn't feel stressed. I had a safe place to stay. I had the means to stay there if I needed. I was having a great time. But when I finally got the confirmation that this came through, I burst into tears. And I didn't realize that I was stressed about not having a flight home. So that has taken me full circle back to working with patients. If they have stressors in their life, I'm going to help them deal with those, because our perception of stress might be a little altered. Because the only other time that I cried on this trip was when the borders to Canada were going to be closed. Because if something happened to my family? Look, still bugs me. So that was the only other time that I got emotional in this whole time. So I realized stress can really affect us even more than maybe I thought. June 1st, the Vatican museums reopen. This was amazing. This is the Pinecone Courtyard. So they had limited, just a moment. This is the photo from Rick Steves' website. And this is what I was expecting. Okay. And, any place I go, expect people. Well, that's the same room with me in it. So that was my experience at Vatican, because they had limited the allowance to no more than 10% of normal attendees. I found this sculpture interesting. This is apparently where it all started. This sculpture was uncovered in a vineyard elsewhere in Italy. The Pope learned about it, loved it, brought it back to Vatican, and it was the beginning of creating a museum and his passion for sculpture and art. There's outdoor spaces, indoor spaces. Without people, you can really appreciate what's in there. I love the tile flooring. I just love there weren't people, so that you could really just see everything, right? It was about the wall, the structures, not just the items that are on the walls. You could just get a perspective of size and the beauty of everything. This was a hall of tapestries. I wasn't expecting to see the bottom 6 feet of it. That was pretty nice to see. Same thing with the hall of maps. I really love this one. Just different interpretations over the centuries of what Italy looks like. And I love the detail everywhere else. It wasn't just the main frescoes on the walls. It's all the detail. It's carved into the windows. It's the detail in the corners going up to the ceilings. It was just stunning. I felt this way at the Borghese Gallery. Everywhere is beautiful. And apparently this is why there were so few people at the Vatican in the rooms that I was at. This is Raphael room. And apparently it had been in some form of restoration for the previous 5 years. So people hadn't been able to fully enjoy it. I don't even know if they've had access to it. And it was unveiled today. So I walk into this room, there's lots of people, there's all sorts of media, They're taking photos of this wall. So of course, once I got home, I had to Google it. That's when I learned that it had been basically unavailable to people for that long. And so everyone flocked to this room when I enjoyed the rest of the museums almost on my own. It was, again, really good timing. Oops, no photos are allowed in the Sistine Chapel. I don't know how that happened. This is coming back from the Sistine Chapel. Just everything is art. It's not just the things on the, look, every surface is painted, the walls are painted, the ceilings, and it's just, you can see all the doorways going into, off into the distance. It's just a long room and a doorway and a long room and a doorway. And every wall ceiling is painted. There are artifacts everywhere. It's amazing. Requisite staircase, getting out of the Vatican. And fun fact, important tip, posted mail sent from Vatican City is going to get to its destination more efficiently than it's sent through Italian post. So buy your stamps on the way out. St. Peter's Basilica, went there on June 4th. It finally opened as well, and still very few people around. I developed also an obsession with ceilings. I have a lot of ceiling photos. Amazing. Like, I know photos don't really give you perspective, but to help, those letters that are on gold, those are 7 feet tall. So it's an enormous place. It holds 60,000 people. More ceiling and beauty and amazing. And without people, as I say, I could look at everything, the floors, the pillars, all of that. Michelangelo's Pietà. My dear friend Janet Fairbridge asked for a photo of this because she said when she was there, she couldn't get a clear photo through all the people. So I took this one, and that one, and that one, and that one. I had a little fun with that, felt a little cheeky. And again, for size, there's those letters 7 feet tall. And then a week before I was scheduled to come home, we were allowed to travel within the country. So I thought, well, I'll take an opportunity and see at least one other place. So I took the train up to Florence for 3 days, and it was beautiful. And so I'm usually vegetarian, sometimes eat some fish or seafood, but I figured when I was in Italy, if it's recommended, I'm gonna try it. And so this sandwich came highly recommended. It's like one of those little, you just walk up to the wall, one of those little sandwich bars. And this was amazing. And I'm writing the details because if you're going to Florence, I highly recommend it. And I don't regret it at all. It was amazing. And I got that. And then I walked to this piazza and sat there and ate my sandwich and watched people. And the next day went up to this, you climb up a hill, look out over the city. But the city is very generous. It's basically a large town. So if you've ever wanted to start in some place that feel comfortable in, I would recommend Florence. You could get from one end to the other walking in like 30 minutes. But so much to see in it, like those little streets. The building in the middle, that big brown one, that is the Basilica of Santa Croce. I really wanted to go in there. It was from a room with a view, but not unable to do that. But other beautiful things to see. This was also in the piazza. Everything's beautiful and so much history, right? Uffizi Gallery, went into that. You can Google that if you want to see the art on the walls. This is the ceiling. Like, that's how much beauty is there. It's just the detail. That is a ceiling. Just one of the many, 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 many junctures along the way. The important things I did, like eat gelato and look at fountains, and the Duomo, of course. And I found a wonderful carousel, still operational in a piazza in the evening. It was lovely. It was lovely. What about Venice? I was halfway to Venice after all, Rome, Florence. It was like, why don't I go to Venice? The first night I thought I would, the next day or before I came back. But then I woke up at 3 a.m. like, what am I thinking? I'm about to fly home tomorrow. They check our temperature before we can get on any train. What happens if, for whatever reason, I spike a fever in Venice? I am stuck in Venice for 2 weeks. And so Venice is still waiting for me. I did the responsible thing and returned to Rome. I loved Rome in the evenings. It started back in May, in a lovely warm evening, and I started going out, and everything is so beautifully lit. It's almost like it's a different place. stunning. I love how they put so much attention into that. That's Piazza Navona. This is an archway for a walkway from the 2nd century. And you pass it on the way to the bakery. I never lost that amusement and awe. An old market. This is just outside. Like, you don't need to buy tickets for museums. It is an amazing outdoor museum. The Colosseum. Little segment, the oldest stone bridge in Rome, 2nd century BCE. Still there in the river. And this is where I'd like to go and sit on the river against one of the posts and just watch the river go by. It was so lovely, this speed of life. There was never anywhere to rush to. It was just doing what I wanted when I wanted, and it was a beautiful gift. This is fantastic. Free water all over Rome. Those are all fountains. There's an app for everything. There's an app for that. These fountains are called Nassonis, and they just run spring water constantly. And so you can just fill up the bottle wherever, or you put your fingers along the rushing water and it comes out of that little hole. So you can, like a water fountain. Things I loved, eating outside, just right on the street. A little car pass you, you're just right on the street. Just some of my views from different places that I ate. I loved walking along the river with these amazing trees, right? Just with their branches going over down into the river. You walk along and suddenly there is this archway, 3rd century archway, just between 2 more recent buildings. I love this old structure, old meets new, because then there's also air conditioners. And then something I've been walking along, just this, walkway from Campo di Fiore a few times, and then suddenly stopped and realized, like, wow, how old is this? It's like old filled with old. I wish there were signs everywhere to say exactly what you were looking at and how old it was. I miss walking just past unassuming little doorways, and you look in and there's outstanding courtyards. Going into a little unassuming door of a church and finding something like this, and this is what almost all of them looked like. This is was a festival area. It's called Teatro Marcello, and it's older than the Colosseum. It has a similar look to the Colosseum, but it's not just roped off. Look, there's windows on the top few floors. And so it's actually, I was told there's residences. People live in these old buildings, which I thought was amazing. And this is my last night in Rome. This was amazing. The sun had just gone down and it was just beautiful light. I walk around a corner that I had done many times before, and it was just the light and everything was so perfect. And down in on the other side of that road, a perfect spot in the ruins, he must have known exactly where to go for acoustics. There was a fellow playing a violin with an amplifier, and he was playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And that's what I was hearing as I am looking at this on my last night, and it was perfect. So basically I spent my last evening walking around, saying goodbye and thank you to all these beautiful places that I had been to over the course of those, I guess it was probably about 6 weeks that I got to do all that exploring. And when you're walking 5 to 6 hours a day in the same city, these places become very familiar to you. So it was beautiful to say goodbye. And there's a bit of audio with that violinist here. And this song I will forever associate with my last night in Rome. It was absolutely beautiful. I hope you can hear that. And so June 18th, I flew home. I have a wonderful neighborhood, and they put some signage out there for me, welcome me home, and it was so sweet. And then 2 weeks later, after my quarantine, first morning out, I walked down to Sunset Point and to say hello to my home again. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I have so many photos, but I really tried to stick within that time limit.